Travis Wayne Goodsell. In February 1997, I deciphered the Paleo-Hebrew script and had been testing the vocabulary in finding out how Joseph Smith translated the Hebrew text of the Bible differently in his King Follett Discourse. And my wife at the time wanted nothing to do with Hebrew and said she didn't want her kids learning Hebrew. And so she abandoned the marriage, fled the country, and abducted the kids, and even abducted my research. Because after all, she wanted nothing to do with the ancient language of the Jews, so I shouldn't have anything to do with the ancient language of the Jews. And she left, and that summer I had to use my tax refund for a new computer, and began redoing my research and continuing on from there. And in January 2nd, 1998, according to the church's troublemaker file of me,
Jose Pereira, you have a guest in the lobby. Jose Pereira, you have a guest in the lobby. Thank you.
apparently they had the same understanding about me in Hebrew, that they don't want their members to learn Hebrew. And so, instead of leaving, I was supposed to leave. But they failed to do so. I then got a hold of farms. My dad knew can't remember his name. They went to Berkeley together. And that's how the two couples know each other. It's gonna bug me, but I'm not gonna search for the name. If it's not gonna come to me, it's not gonna come to me. But Dad took me to one of his lectures at BYU, and had me talk with him afterward. And he was telling us about the story of how he had created the definition of an Egyptian sign that nobody else knew of, the translation of it, and he said he just made it up, that he had no knowledge of what the actual translation was from the coffin that they had found. And despite saying that he can do it and got away with it, as it's now the official translation, that people need to be very careful about making translations. Really? And I'd gotten a hold of John Tavetinas on the phone, where he told me Joseph Smith was wrong. And then when I asked him about it in a lecture series that he gave, he denied that he said that. And yeah, it caused quite a stir in that session. But Daniel Peterson then sent me a letter saying I'm banned from farms. John Gee sent me a letter in I think 5 different forms of Hebrew translation, which is unprofessional and wrong. to do, but he was mocking me, and so he thought he was clever. But the mere fact that I was able to identify the 5 different forms of translation, he was using transliteration, the alphabet, which was not the original. It was post-Greek period of time when the Egyptian alphabet was created. And then different time periods of when Egyptian was used. And so, yeah, and it was also during this time when my dad thought he would, silence me for good on this translation stuff. And he had found online an Egyptian test, which he had taken and failed. And so, surely I would fail. And he stood over me, watching as I took it. And I was expecting more, and it said I was done 100%. Yeah. So my dad was in shock. Literally, he was in shock. He was just standing there. It's just, you'd think they'd be happy for me. That, oh, Joseph Smith is a translator? This is exciting. Tell us more. Okay. I'll tell you more. But, yeah, that was not the case. Everybody was turning on me, not wanting me to do what I was doing and showing that Joseph Smith is a translator. And so I finally came across what was then called the Priesthood Curriculum Department. They made the manuals for Priesthood and Relief Society, as well as were involved in the magazines for the 3 age groups: the primary, the young adults, and the adults. And I was told that his department does not hire anybody and does not take any submissions, that all submissions would get filed just like with the Ensign into filing cabinets, and if they get told that they need to do a specific topic for an article, they can refer to the filing cabinet in that section to see if there's anything there, except that he knew people, and so when he wanted something for the magazines, he would just reach out to those people directly, say, we'd like an article on this topic. And so I figured that was it. The church has no need of a translator. And so I'd been continuing on as I was still working for the church at the distribution center warehouse on 17th and 17th, and it was actually 17th and 19th, something like that, but and transferred over to the Beehive Clothing in the warehouse. And one day he came in and met me in the warehouse. As he's an employee, he can do that, I guess. And he had a paper with him, which was an application for me to be a special church service missionary. They had already begun working on altering the footnotes in the scriptures to correspond to the new guide to the scriptures that was going to be used for foreign editions. and because of my knowledge in the Old Testament, as that was my education, degree, experience, and would-be publication at that time if we had Amazon to freely publish, as I've done since. But I had them written up. The research was well underway as I was working on Egyptian decipherment of the characters that had not yet been deciphered. And so because I'm an expert in all this, it bores me when people who are ignorant on the subject think that they can just deny. It's like, why are you even bothering? I mean, seriously. You think you can just deny what I have learned through scientific methodology and belittle it as my truth and all that crap nonsense that people love to cause problems with these days? And so I filled it out and turned it back in, and because I was divorced from the first wife, finally, she made sure to get it up there in Canada without me. Apparently she can do that after a year of being separated. I didn't get to inform the judge up there that she had abandoned the marriage and fled the country with our kids, abducting them and taking my research, among other property of mine. And so, despite my resume, which was the application, was to write in my resume in the manner in which they were wanting it to conform to, he had to submit it to President Hinckley for his approval. And of course, he obviously speaks with Jesus, and so it's Jesus' approval, right? And you know, and so, but he comes back and at work and says that I was approved, and that I am approved by the highest authority. As he smiles and winks, as we're supposed to understand what that means. Jesus. And so I go in on Tuesdays and I pick up some enlarged print-offs of pages of scripture. And I'm supposed to use a red ink pen to make my changes, and there were certain formatting styles that I was supposed to use in making the notations for the changes, and then was supposed to sign the page at the bottom upon my finishing, because these were going to be filed for all time and for all eternity. And so, yeah, I'd get, you know, a minimum sampling that he thought I could handle, as other people also were given certain amounts to work on during the week, and I'd come back and have him finished, and he asked if I was able to take more, and yeah, and so I was able to take more, and I asked if I'm able to, if I'm finished early, am I able to come in and turn them in early? And he said, yeah. And so, yeah, I was very quick, and very proficient, because he was telling us that all that was needed was to change out the topical guide and Bible dictionary footnotes, and if we can find a guide to the scriptures footnote, to make that change. He didn't want us to go through all the footnotes and do any changing of any of that. But if I'm going to find errors, I have to have them corrected. I'd already done that as part of my scripture study, going through the footnotes, and I already knew many of the errors that needed to be changed. And so, despite his counsel that I didn't need to, that gives me permission to do. And so I kept doing it, because I'm that quick. And as he was finding out, I'm very accurate. And then it turned out that others also were finding out that there were footnotes that made absolutely no sense. And so a new system needed to be developed to fix the footnotes of the Bible. And so they put people into committees, and there was the majority of the committees that were involved in finishing up what was left to do of the pages. And then he had only two groups, two committees, that oversaw all the work that had been done. The one committee was from BYU. Then I was in the other committee. Because remember, I'm that good. And I was compared to Bruce R. McConkie with my ability to do it. And I can testify that Bruce R. McConkie is nothing. He ain't got game compared to me. Literally. This is no joke. I am being humble when I am being honest. That's what you don't understand when Jesus says, I am the Son of God, and we all say, oh, he's so humble. He was telling the truth. That's why. And so in this group, we have David Gaunt, who had been at that time a seminary instructor for 16 years out in Sandy. And so it's likely there are those who've had him for seminary. And so he was utilized because of that. Also, his wife is involved with the magazines, and he also had another job there in the church office building, which is why they were able to utilize him. And then there was James Baker, whose expertise was in being educated on the Jewish legal system, and knew all of the laws that were violated in the account of Jesus's arrest and then crucifixion. And then the other position switched. We had one guy, and then he left, and then another guy came in. And so Paul was pretty much the main one that we had. He was an older Mormon, been around since the founding of the church, and a long-time faithful Mormon who knew things. And And so, to get to the point, we were given Deuteronomy, and it's what I had already done and had made the footnotes as yeah, they still have most of them, and so I really didn't do much to it, but took out the Jesus Christ mission of Jesus Christ prophecies about in 15b, and also in 18a, topical guide Jesus Christ prophecies about, as I guess there was some concern that I didn't replace them with the guide to the scripture version, which come on, there we go. But I see from what had been replaced, just the passage in Acts, 3 Nephi 20. I don't remember adding that one. And Joseph Smith History 140. I think it's because it was already in the original. 3 Nephi 20. Yeah, 3 Nephi 20:23 was in the original, and I just let it flow, let it go. And so they cut it short that way. But he comes in, and he immediately says, "It's Jesus Christ." And I'm like, huh? What? Whatever. You know, let's get on with this. And he didn't want it any other way. I was then told by James Baker that Avraham Gileadi was excommunicated by the church for his belief in a man like Moses for this prophecy. But he also believed in Jesus, and the two separate persons was considered still an abomination by the church, and so he.
We are now taking clothing orders at the front desk. If you need any clothes or hygiene items, please come to the front desk. Once again, if you need any clothes or hygiene items, please come to the front desk.
And so it's and I probably don't need to, but there we go. Got 8 minutes on the other video to be uploaded, which again, he doubled up the time. He let me go on the second video, but not the first and third. And so I obviously don't have time to go into the other things that we went into. It's just for this one. As this is the learning of the Jews, and David Gaunt is not an expert. He was used because he's been in seminary for 16 years, so he's read the manuals, and he works for the church, and his wife works for the church, and he's a faithful tithe payer, thus worthy to enter into the temple. But that doesn't make a Mormon an expert in Scripture. And so as much as we let that go, we did try to let other things go through that we had to put a stop to, like the stopping of calling Tamar a prostitute. And that needed to stop, and the church refused. So she's still a prostitute. And I tried to correct the Sodom and Gomorrah story by referencing it to Ezekiel, because that's what we were supposed to do. But David Gaunt insisted that homosexuality be included. Again, he knows nothing of Scripture. And he's now perpetuating the influencing of people into that belief that it was for homosexuality, rather than neglecting the poor. But nonetheless, I had no knowledge at that time, because it wasn't a question on my mind that nobody was giving me an answer to. That who is such a person, and that's what happens with apologists in the church, is that in trying to deflect and distract people away from the initial claim, they end up talking about other things that gets the church in deeper trouble, instead of protecting and defending the church, as they claim to be apologists for. And so they're not really defending the church if they keep getting the church in trouble. So, for example, John D. Welsh, the chiasmus in the Book of Mormon. Hebrew chiasmus in the Book of Mormon. Well, it turns out it's from the late war, and so you can go online and see the comparative chart of the two books. And so it doesn't support the Book of Mormon being an ancient document. It supports the Book of Mormon being plagiarized using the late war as one of its many dozens of other plagiarized materials. You have it's been a while since I've done this kind of video of the different apologists who think they've got something and end up actually causing more problems for the church. Joe Samson, written by the finger of God, has found Jewish Kabbalah within the Book of Mormon, specifically in the 116 rewritten pages. And yep, that's where I came in when I did church history, or real research into the church history, as I found out it was Joseph Smith Sr. when he was in Vermont with the New Israelites. They taught him Kabbalah. And and so then this just things fall into place thereafter, as I learn Jewish apocalyptic writing, and thus Deuteronomy is likewise in that apocalyptic literature writing, because it's talking about a man of the latter days. So he's not talking about Jesus, not just because it's a Jew talking about a Christ for the future time, that the future time, as everybody else talks about, is for the latter days, not a Roman period guy who would be named the wrong name, and who would fail to fulfill the prophecies during that Roman period time. And apparently, as you're brainwashed from youth, you don't see the blatantly obvious, and that's where my English grammar expertise really helped out, as I was able to identify contradictions between what the prophets were saying, what members of the church were saying, what the manuals were saying, and what I was reading from the scriptures. And I would go on to write it all down on little notes of paper, all these over the years. And I mean, we're talking a big stack of papers. And one day, while needing a break from the Paleo-Hebrew vocabulary research, I saw the big pile and thought, well, let's go through it and see what we got, and then went on to make a book on philosophy of Mormonism. Because as a child, I was recognizing the contradictions. And this Deuteronomy passage is one of those contradictions that I'd always recognized, because it clearly wasn't saying Jesus. It was saying a prophet. And Joseph Smith is called a prophet, and thus it seems to be a man. And I didn't understand why the Jesus in Matthew 24, would go on to say, instead of him, I am coming back in the latter days, and I will do this, and I will do that. Instead, he says, the Son of Man shall. Repeats Son of Man over and over again throughout the rest of the document. And that's quite a change in the linguistic pattern. And then you find out Ezekiel, likewise, is called the Son of Man. And, as I do the research, I get my answers. But it literally was proving that this church that branched off from Joseph Smith after his murder is the Great and Abominable Church. And that's why they are purposely lying to us about the scriptures and the interpretation thereof. That's why they're not adding more scripture. That's why they won't correct the translation of the Bible. That's why they won't finish the translation of the Book of Abraham and do any translation on the Book of Joseph. This is why they don't have the Apocrypha in our Bible. This is why they don't have any of what's called pseudepigrapha, like the Apocalypse and Gospel of Peter. You know, they let the Bible be as it is, and they're not going to change it. And yet we're told as Mormons that there's going to be more scripture coming. And we're fooled into thinking it's more commandments. It's not more commandments, it's more apocalyptic stories about the latter days. It's not something we should fear, but should embrace. And as the video is ending here, that's all I can stand. I can't stand so far. And it is done. And so I'm done here. Just to let you know that Mormons keep resisting scripture. They don't like the truth. Even though the truth will set you free, the church does not want more Mormons to be set free. They will not leave me alone, because this is religious hatred. Oh. No views, but one like Are you sure it wasn't supposed to be a dislike? Did you put it on the wrong thumbnail? Or the wrong thumb thing? Because he'd been right there for the thumbs down on the other two. It is hate. When Mormons cannot leave me alone to preach from the Book of Mormon and from Joseph Smith about them, to go into ancient languages to show how Joseph Smith was a translator, to go to the Joseph Smith papers to show how Joseph Smith's church was Jewish, Kabbalah, and not Christian, that Jesus is not his Christ. And Mormons can't. They can't let it go, because if they do, then it's me versus them. Either I'm right or they're right. And they're not right. And so I have to be attacked to show that they're right. And in so doing, they actually do the contrary. Because I know I'm right. I use science. But they use fallacy argument. They've got no argument for a basis that the church is true. And I do. And it has to stop. Just that simple. I just barely clicked on it, and so anyway, it's not a complicated thing, but yeah, all this talk of Mormons, oh yeah, we tolerate and accept everybody else for whatever religion. The church helps others. They helped build the Islamic mosque here in Utah. They helped pay for the Baptist church repairs or whatever. They've given to Catholic charities, so on and so on and so on. And yet, I know the truth. Because they cannot accept that Joseph Smith is Jewish. That ancient translation is correct. That the Book of Mormon is correct as apocalyptic literature. That Joseph Smith history is apocalyptic literature. They will not cross that threshold to allow me my religious freedom, which they themselves taught me that this was the case from primary, being born and raised in the covenant in the Mormon church. And it's like they purposely sabotage us. Oh yeah, you can learn all you want, just don't go against our interpretation. That's what they say when they say don't go against the church. Is if you find out that the church isn't true, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. I'll prove it to you with the sword. Really? You forgot Nehor slaying Gideon, and then going before Alma, and first time the priestcraft was used among this people, but not only priestcraft, but you enforced it with the sword. And so yeah, that's what the Aldrich boy did in Colorado. He enforced Mormonism upon the club in Colorado with an AK-47, wasn't it? So yeah, this is they destroyed my life, all because I cannot deny the truth. I can't do it. No matter how much they threaten me, no matter how many death threats I get, no matter how many complaints and false witnesses that is thrown at me, I can't deny the truth. I used the scientific method. And they don't get it, because they don't use it. It's a spiritual witness. And they think that they're protected in their spiritual witness, when no, they automatically lose when they use the spiritual witness argument. And they don't get it. They don't want to get it. They don't care to get it. So, this is the dilemma.